As Christians, we're often talking about right and wrong. How should we be living? What should we be doing? How do we please God? Should we impose our own moral beliefs on others? The outside world, the non-believers, will often see this as being very judgmental. And I've often heard a complaint levied against Christians that Christians seem to not even follow their own rules. It seems that Christians just pick and choose what parts of the Bible they really want to follow, and then they take those rules that they like and they impose them on everyone else. Today I don't know any Christian that follows all the Old Testament laws, rules about ceremonial washings, about certain dietary restrictions. You're not supposed to eat shellfish. No Christian I know follows those rules. So what's the deal? Why do Christians today ignore some parts of the Bible but follow others? And why are they so strict about the parts that only they like? Well, I think it's important for us to really look into what are these laws that we're talking about in the Old Testament, these Old Testament rules. Usually when we're hearing people talk about the Old Testament law, what they're talking about is the law that was given to Moses. It's actually not the law for the entirety of the Old Testament, but it's a law specifically given to Moses when he is taking the Jews out of Egypt. Now this law, it includes the Ten Commandments that most people are familiar with, or at least have heard about, and includes a number of other rules, some very specific rules about the way you're supposed to live. I think it's important to think about what this law is and is not. One thing it is not the institution of the moral law. What I mean by that is, right and wrong did not originate at the time of Moses when this law was given by God. Right and wrong existed before the time of Moses. See, there's a long time in the Bible between creation, between the life of the first man and then the life of Moses, including many important religious leaders like Abraham, the father of the Jewish people. During this time, right and wrong still exists. There's many examples of all kinds of sin, including murder, during this time, and it's always expressed as being wrong. So when the Ten Commandments finally get given to Moses and God says, "Thou shalt not murder," this is not a new concept. God is not saying, now, because I've said this, murder is wrong. No, murder was always wrong. Now this law that is being given to Moses is simply a reflection of pre-existing moral truths. I think I see a sort of an example or a sort of parallel with something in American history in my own home state. I was born and raised in California, and so I got my schooling, my training here. I know a little bit about the history. I know that the state was founded in 1850. That's when it officially became a state. Even though there was a period of time between when the United States basically had control of California and it became an actual state. Once it became a state, they started writing state laws, including the law against murder. And they set up local law enforcement, the county sheriffs, who were supposed to enforce all the laws that they were writing. During the time before the law was actually written down that murder was wrong, murder was still wrong. California was writing it into law because now that gave legal authority to the sheriff to go and pursue murderers. So now he has a legal authority to do something about it under this new government that's being created. But it's not as though murder is wrong because there's a law against it. There's a law against it because murder was always wrong. Now there's some laws in California that don't seem to have a direct one-to-one relationship with moral law. For example, the speed limit. Before there was a speed limit, if I drove down the street at 26 miles an hour down my residential street, that would have been fine. There's nothing morally objectionable about that. Or if I chose to drive 24 miles an hour. But when we decided as a state that we're going to write some laws about speed limits, we decided residential streets were going to be 25 miles an hour, and that's just the way it was going to be. If they had chosen not to write it at 25, they decided to write, let's make the speed limit 20. Well, that would have been okay too. There's not a pre-existing moral law about speed limits that the speed limit mirrors. Instead, the speed limit suggests something about the culture it's being written in, that the culture values safety. That's why the speed limit laws are being written. They're trying to accomplish a goal, which is safety. And so that's why we have speed limit laws. Now that they're written, I as a citizen should follow them. But there wasn't a pre-existing moral law about speed limits prior to being written. All right, let's look back at the Mosaic Law and see how this applies. See, certain parts of the Mosaic Law, the law given to Moses, often will be called the Mosaic Law. Parts of this law directly reflect pre-existing moral law, but some do not. For example, the dietary restrictions in the law of Moses. Prior to the law of Moses, God had never instituted a dietary restriction, and there was no right or wrong about what you ate. In fact, if you look at the life of Abraham, the Bible suggests Abraham does not keep the law of Moses when it comes to dietary restriction. But God has a purpose for creating all these new rules for Moses. See, Moses is taking the Egyptians out of, or the Jews rather, out of Egypt. When the Jews lived in Egypt, they followed the Egyptian laws. But now the Jews are leaving Egypt, they're going to create their own nation. Just like we in California created our own state. With this new nation called Israel, the Israelites needed laws now to follow, to function as a government. And these laws are given by God himself. So God gives some laws which help enforce the moral laws, the pre-existing moral laws. And then God gives other laws to the nation to help the nation function. Some of these, kind of like speed limits, speak to something about the nation. God gives dietary restrictions in part because this helps set the Jews aside from the people groups that they are surrounded by. It helps them to see that they are supposed to be a holy and set apart people. And so there's many things that the Jews did to show that they were not like the cultures that surrounded them. Okay, so why don't Christians follow it though, right? Because God, regardless of why God gave the law to Moses, I mean, he gave it to him. So shouldn't we still be following it? I mean, why do we get to just decide to ignore it? Well, it's not really the Christian deciding. It's actually the Bible itself. The New Testament talks throughout in many different ways about the fact that the time of the law of Moses is past. That it was a specific law for a specific people for a specific set of time, and now it's going away. Jesus says he came to fulfill the law. God actually gives a vision to the Apostle Peter about the law, showing him that now all things are clean to eat, talking about those dietary restrictions. But he also says that the Gentiles, people who did not keep to the Mosaic law, that those people are still welcome into the Christian family if they are believers. Paul repeatedly talks about not needing to follow the law of Moses in order to be a Christian. You don't need to be circumcised, for example, he says. So the Bible actually explicitly talks about the end of the law of Moses. This is not the Christian deciding that they don't like it. And if we get rid of the law of Moses, we're not moving into a lawless time period. Before the law of Moses, there was right and wrong. And after it, there is still right and wrong. There's teachings in the Bible both before and after, as well as throughout the time of the law of Moses, which all speak to the same transcendent moral truths. So just because the law of Moses is gone away doesn't mean that there's no moral laws for us to follow today. God still has things that he wants from us. There's still right and wrong.